I am Stephen Fenberg. I am so pleased to be here to talk about the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the nation's infrastructure bank that saved capitalism during the Great Depression and militarized industry in time to fight and win World War II. I am Jesse Jones's biographer. Jesse Jones was chairman of the RFC throughout the Great Depression and World War II. The RFC saved capitalism during the Great Depression, militarized industry in time to fight and win World War II, and was the nation's biggest lender, and it was started by a Republican president, Herbert Hoover. President Hoover had relied on declarations to say the economy is recovering, confidence is restored, the economic calamity will disappear, but it did not. Thankfully, he changed gears and accepted the role of government as an agent of positive change and established the Reconstruction Finance Corporation during his last year in office, thinking that making loans to banks, railroads, and insurance companies would restore confidence and revive the economy. Unfortunately, it was too little, too late, and it didn't work. President Franklin Roosevelt inherited the RFC from President Hoover, as well as one of its board members, Jesse Jones, who was Houston's preeminent developer during the first part of the 20th century and a renowned and extraordinarily successful businessman. The United States Congress, within days of Roosevelt's inauguration, passed the Emergency Banking Act by unanimous vote in both houses of Congress. It enabled the RFC to act to save the United States economy. And here's what it did. Through judicious lending, not spending, the RFC saved hundreds of thousands of homes, farms, banks, businesses. It built aqueducts, tunnels, and bridges across the nation. It revitalized the railroads, then one of the nation's largest employers and taxpayers, and financed the development of high-speed trains. The RFC brought electricity to rural America when only 2 out of 10 people had power. And then it helped them finance the purchases of appliances so they could plug into the modern age. The RFC even helped victims of disasters restore their homes and their towns. And the most amazing part of all this is that doing all these monumental tasks that touch the lives of every American citizen, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, through judicious lending, not spending, that's the important distinction. The RFC made money for the federal government, for the taxpayers, for you and for me. Then it turned its focus from domestic economics to global defense as war was spreading through Europe. And by then, the RFC was almost universally embraced by conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats. Even Fortune magazine, a renowned business publication, wrote in 1940 that the RFC was a splendid example of how business and government can cooperate to make big, important things happen. So as war was spreading through Europe, the United States was completely unprepared. Our military ranked 17th in the world. Germany's military budget was 20 times larger than ours. We had a few thousand antiquated airplanes, some tanks. Germany had almost 10,000 airplanes. Japan had 7,500. I think we had no more than 2,000. And Roosevelt's hands were tied because of neutrality acts that prevented the United States from selling arms to warring nations, and because the public was opposed to intervention unless the United States was directly attacked. So instead of going to Congress for appropriations, Roosevelt turned to Jesse Jones and the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, our infrastructure bank at the time. Jones went to Congress and they gave him the power to begin militarizing industry. He did not take that power. It was granted to him through Congress. So then the RFC began building the massive plants that would manufacture the tanks, trucks, airplanes and ships required to fight and win World War II. It manufactured aluminum, magnesium, and steel, and imported strategic materials from around the world. Their activities were comprehensive both during the Great Depression and to militarize industry in time to fight and win World War II. They couldn't just do things in isolation. It had to be the big picture. They had to do it all at once, and it worked. It happened. The RFC even accumulated wool from around the world to make uniforms for our soldiers. The RFC was even developed synthetic rubber from the lab to mass production, just as the Japanese took our supply of natural rubber when it conquered the Pacific Ocean. It's very telling how that happened as we grapple with our own issues like the pandemic and climate change, to see how government launched this effort, a cohesive effort to develop synthetic rubber. The RFC orchestrated that by assembling corporate leaders, the leaders of oil industries, chemical industries, scholars, scientists. They pooled their patents and figured out how to develop synthetic rubber from the lab to mass production. The RFC built the plants just like it built all the plants that manufactured the means to fight war, and leased them to corporations to operate. After the war was over, it was imperative that all this ownership, this government ownership, be transferred back to private hands. Just in aviation alone, the RFC owned 75% of that industry. It owned 100% of the synthetic rubber industry. But it was never the government's intention to nationalize any kind of industry or banks during the Great Depression. The RFC's intention was to save capitalism and save democracy, and that is precisely what it did. And most of the times it did that at a profit for the United States taxpayer. Today, an infrastructure bank, just like the RFC, can do the great things required of our nation. All we need to do is look at the successes of the past for strategies today, because there are many ways the RFC accomplished these big, great things for our nation that we can adapt to today.
Greetings. My name is Alphecca Muttardy, and I'm a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. And the theme for today's webinar is how the new enactment of a Reconstruction Finance Corporation in the form of a national infrastructure bank today can benefit all aspects in America. That is workers, businesses, the United States government and government coffers, and even political parties. So I want to talk a little bit today about those benefits from the NIB, following on what Stephen has said about how a national infrastructure bank worked in the past. So we're here to talk about HR 6422, which is a bill introduced into Congress to create a new version, a national infrastructure bank today that would lend up to $4 trillion to finance infrastructure projects all across the United States. And on previous webinars, I've talked about how this bank would work, but quickly, it would be a standalone public bank that would finance projects through the creation of money at the time that loans are given, just like all commercial banks create money when they provide loans. And as such, this bank will not require any net resources from the federal government in terms of new taxes or creating new debt. Let's break apart all the benefits that would come out of this bank. First of all, it would finance all of the infrastructure in the United States. Currently, we have a bit of a logjam in Congress to reauthorize spending for infrastructure projects. That would only be a 5-year spending program in any case, but it is still not large enough to cover all the infrastructure. That's because the Society of Civil Engineers say we need at least $4.6 trillion, and the current bills in Congress would only cover about 1 trillion of that we've been able to add up. So our infrastructure bank at 4 trillion would cover all of those projects that are not currently receiving funding from either the federal budget or state and local budgets through pay-as-you-go or financed by municipal bonds. We would cover the remainder of that for roads, bridges, airports, parks, schools, all of the kinds of things that the American Society of Civil Engineers say we need to repair and build up again. In addition, we want to have a broader definition of infrastructure, and we want to make sure we have enough funding in the bank to cover high-speed rail, affordable broadband everywhere, and large water projects in addition. So that's where we come to the $4 trillion price tag. And the benefit of having a bank which covers all of the infrastructure is that there won't be any elbowing or disputes among localities as to where the infrastructure will go and whose project will be funded at the expense of another one, because there will be money in there for every single project. So we'll be able to cover things that have not traditionally been covered, like the full financing for the Gateway Project and the Northeast Corridor in the northeast part of the United States, for large levee and dam projects along the Gulf Coast to protect from hurricanes, completing high-speed rail all along the Pacific Ocean, and shoring up our electric grid so that it is impervious to wildfires and hurricanes and strong winds, those kinds of things. The second group of in the United States that would really benefit from this bank are American workers. Spending $4 trillion means we're going to be hiring at least 25 million workers, both directly and indirectly, to complete all of this new building. With the projects that are financed by the bank will require the payment of Davis-Bacon wages. They'll provide full-time jobs with benefits, with full benefits, including health care. And the bank will also indirectly ensure that all of the training is provided to get American workers up to speed in these new careers. And we'll be able to employ from among all of the Americans who are made unemployed by the coronavirus pandemic and have permanently lost their jobs. The third set of entities that will really benefit from the bank are American businesses. We know that we'll require a whole lot of new inputs into this construction, everything from engineering firms to construction companies to fabricators and the suppliers of all the rail and cement and all the other materials that will go into this construction. And then indirectly businesses will benefit because there'll be more money in people's pockets in the middle to go out and buy their goods and services. And then finally, increased productivity means that trucks will move faster. All of the benefits that come from increased productivity, there'll be more connectivity with the broadband, will definitely benefit American businesses. The economy will grow. We think that we'll get the kinds of growth rates that we saw during the period of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which averaged 5.5% a year. We could get up that high again. Our very low growth rates now mean that we have low income taxes coming into federal and state coffers, and that's adversely affected their finances, but the opposite is true. With higher growth rates, we'll have higher income taxes coming in, and state and local governments will benefit financially from this. And then finally, this bill requires no new federal taxes or deficits. So it should be appealable to both Democrats and Republicans. Infrastructure has always been a bipartisan issue, and both parties will be able to come around this new project, and then their political parties will benefit from bringing all of these projects home to their particular infrastructure state. In fact, we're starting a new program now where we're going to look at the infrastructure needs state by state and congressional district by congressional district to see where new projects can be fitted in including in the first year of operation of the bank. The opposite is true, that if we do not build this infrastructure, actually economically we will go backwards. The American Society of Civil Engineers has a project where they look at the failure to act. It's called their Failure to Act series. And what they just came out with a report, for example, on water, where they say the costing for water projects is now very much higher. If we fail to act, then, for example, those businesses that rely on water, like water pulp manufacturing, wineries, chemical factories, all those businesses will lose up to $94 billion in business for the lack of water. So that's an example of how we can go backwards, not to mention the fact that we have serious problems with lead in the water and those other kinds of things as well. So for all these reasons, we think that the National Infrastructure Bank is an entity that will glean broad bipartisan support, but most importantly, it will improve every aspect of the economy and benefit all of our nation, workers, businesses, governments. Everybody will benefit from this infrastructure bank.
Good day. I am Stan Forzik. I'm a retired executive from Amtrak with over 30 years of service. I've also been in management of an energy consulting firm and have my own firm now. And I've been doing a lot of work with engineering companies and also financing companies for different projects around the United States. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, and we appreciate the opportunity to move forward and explain some of the things that we see as we go forward to get HR 6422 approved. In my last webinar, I discussed mindset and the mindset of the country, and I want to continue on that, but I want to bring in another faction to discuss the mindset. Mindset, the way I say it, has changed over the last 60 years in that years ago, we never worried about how much things would cost, what it was going to be. And you've heard some of the figures. Alphecca mentions what is going to be the cost. You also heard Stephen talk about Roosevelt's infrastructure bank. And there was no mention of cost or the price tag for which these projects are going to be done. But in today's world, it's a complete 180-degree turnaround where we look at what the price tag is and our eyes gloss over, and we never get anything done. Our infrastructure continues to fall apart. We haven't seen any really large infrastructure projects come in the last several decades. And the issue is some municipalities, some states are doing infrastructure projects, but it's costing them a lot more. So we want to ensure that we change the mindset from worrying about the price tag and be more concerned with what it does for the betterment of the country, the betterment of all the people within the country. The other thing I want to talk about mindset is the issue of bipartisanship. We seem to have lost the bipartisanship that we had many years ago, where one side of the aisle talked to the other side of the aisle, negotiated, and got things done. Today, there's more of a fighting attitude where one side wants to fight the other or point fingers at the other, and we literally get nothing done other than little snippets of talk on a media broadcast or something like that. We just point fingers. And that's not the way we want to be if we're going to approve a bill that is bipartisan for the betterment of the country. We just can't be that way. I think we have to start thinking in terms of bipartisanship. One thing that we have to think about is if you want to be a part of the coalition team, if you want to be a part of those people who want to be who want this bill to move forward, you want to play on the coalition's team. And the coalition's team does not wear red jerseys, does not wear blue jerseys. It wears neutral jerseys. And that's the thing that we have to put forward. We cannot worry about infighting. We cannot worry about talking about each other's sides. There's only one faction that's going to benefit from fixing all of the infrastructure across the country, spending money to supercharge the economy, as Alphecca has brought out. And those are the citizens of the United States. We're doing this for the citizens. We're not doing it for one party, another party. We're not just worried about what gets done. We're worried about the country itself. We have people out of work. We want to put people to work. So we have to remember this is a bipartisan bill. We have to remember that it doesn't benefit any one of the parties. It doesn't benefit any particular group. It benefits everyone. There will not be one person that is not affected by this bill and moving forward with a national infrastructure bank. I want you to keep that in mind, and thank you for continuing to watch our broadcasts and be involved with us. There's a number at the end of this. You should call your congressman, your local congressman, your federal congressman, and get on board, because we need this type of action. As Alphecca says, if we do not do it now, we are going to regress and actually go backwards in time. And we really don't want that. You don't want your children's children to come home sometime just before the start of the 22nd century and not have good, clean water, not have the facilities to get back and forth to school, to jobs. And we have to get this done.
Next, we want to have a perspective provided and given to you as to how a national infrastructure bank is going to affect employment and create opportunities for craftsmen and laborers throughout the country. And for that perspective, we're very happy and pleased to have our next panelist speak, Bill Layton, the business manager of the IUEC. Bill, take it away. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Bill Layton. I'm the local business manager of Elevator Constructors Union Local 52, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. I personally endorsed this plan, and I'm not alone. My union has sent a letter of endorsement urging Congress to act, as well as the local building trades. The Hampton Roads Building Construction Trade Council sent a letter of endorsement. And with the leadership of Jason Parker from the Virginia Building Trades, the Virginia Building Trades sent a letter of endorsement, and the Virginia AFL-CIO has similarly endorsed the creation of a national infrastructure bank. And we're urging Congress to get better informed so that they can make a good decision and get behind this. The advantages of infrastructure development are that it does genuinely benefit everybody. There are no red or blue bridges, right? We all want clean drinking water and air. When your lights go out, do you really care if the lineman, the technician, was a Republican or a Democrat or what faith? No. You want somebody who's qualified to turn your lights back on. Infrastructure is such a part of everyday life, particularly with broadband now. And the folks that are not benefiting from this are certainly being left behind. Investment in any area requires physical and human resources and infrastructure. When a corporation or the government is considering the installation of a factory or a distribution center somewhere, they want to know if they can get their materials in and out efficiently. If they can't make money, they're not going to put it there. The component most important to me is the future of our workforce. We have to find millions of new employees to begin to build and the infrastructure projects. Where do we find them? Well, labor unions and anybody who's behind registered apprenticeships have a model that's scalable, a model that's got thousands of years, and it's apprenticeships. We find the latest product information for whatever our craft is. We train and put forth the most qualified instructors. Each craft is investing millions of dollars a year into the development of their next generation of workers. These workers start out once they're evaluated and they're brought in, and then they go through a training process. It lasts between 3 and 5 years, depending on what the craft is. You get a raise in wage as you meet certain development standards along the way, right? And when you graduate, you end up with a career. And we're not going to be arguing a lot about healthcare if we have 25 million new workers who all have a comprehensive healthcare part of their benefit package, and retirement. And contrary to what's been going on for the last 40 years, where everybody told all the youth of America, either you got a college degree or you weren't going to succeed, well, my apprentices graduate making as much as a 6-year engineer with no debt. We've got half of the American kids with half of an education and a tremendous amount of debt that they're trying to figure out how to get out from under. Apprenticeship is the answer to developing a workforce that's qualified and ready to perform whatever tasks are asked of them, because apprenticeships are specific, providing the education that you need just for the trade that you're going to turn into a paycheck. And that paycheck is going to be considerably above minimum wage or any of the people that are burdened with having to wash dishes at a restaurant for $10 an hour. And I know that that's meaningful work, but I'm sure that guy or gal would certainly like the opportunity to be trained for a meaningful career that comes with a reasonable wage and a long-term benefit package that includes retirement and comprehensive health care. I urge everybody who's listening, call your congressman locally and ask them to support this project. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Bill. I want to also advise our viewers that we have a Q&A, question and answer section where you can type in questions for our panelists that will be answered at the end of their presentations. Next, I want to introduce a panelist that will provide a local government perspective as to the needs and the benefits of what a national infrastructure bank can provide. And her name is Lisa Hicks Clayton, who is a city council member from Dearborn, Michigan. And Lisa, we're happy to have you here today. And you have the floor. Take it away.
Hi, thank you. It's an honor to join everyone today. My name is Lisa Hicks Clayton. I am a city council member in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, and I also work for Senator Alexander's office in Michigan. And the reason I'm joining you today, and I thank you for the opportunity, is to share the importance of HR 6422 in funding the National Infrastructure Bank. We have seen throughout Michigan, when I say the word Michigan, people think of the Flint water crisis. They think of some of those other major infrastructure challenges that our communities have faced. I will tell you, Michigan is not alone in the struggle to fund infrastructure projects that are federally mandated, whether it's CSO projects, water lead replacements. But what I really wanted to talk with you about is we have a movement going on in Michigan. I want to include everyone to take up the torch and make sure you reach out, do grassroots reach out movement to your local elected officials and ask them to adopt a resolution supporting HR 6422. We do want to also mention that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell has come on as a co-sponsor for HR 6422. So again, it's a grassroots effort for our communities. What I wanted to focus on, one of the perspectives that I bring is I have served with Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. They have a task force on economic development. And when I think of right now the crisis we're facing, such a critical time for us in our history. And it is not a partisan issue. This time is not. The response, the solution is not partisan. It needs to be bipartisan. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about economic development and economic prosperity. When as businesses, and I'm going to use Detroit as an example, we've lost business development because of our infrastructure or lack of. We know that businesses rely on transportation modes, whether they're choosing, infrastructure like roadway, railway, whatever they choose, it can drive their cost up and affect their bottom line if they're not able to efficiently move and use transportation, and infrastructure has a direct impact on those businesses and where they set up in your community. Same thing with telecommunications and broadband. I think that's already been mentioned, but I do want to throw in their energy infrastructure as well. I mean, that's critical to businesses having the energy networks in place, the wires, the waterways, the pipelines. It's all very important. So again, what we're going through and what we're seeing right now, this is more than ever a time that we reach across the aisle and work together for a solution that works for all of our communities, including our businesses. And by the way, when your businesses thrive and your economy thrives, your local thrive, so will your residents, and so will your state, and so will our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. We greatly appreciate your comments. Our last panelist is going to provide us with a perspective from a business approach, and through his experiences as being involved in leadership positions as far as corporations are concerned. I'm very happy to introduce to you today our last panelist, Dell Lehrer. Dell, your turn. Thank you. And you might still be, I think you're still on mute, Dell. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Can you? Okay, sorry. In some ways, I'm still learning the technology. Anyway, well, thank you, because the theme of this particular meeting is on bipartisanship. And let me, I live in the Pacific Northwest, but let me give you some context, because most people, when they see the Pacific Northwest, they just look at Portland and Seattle. Actually, I'm near Portland. I'm across the river in the city of Vancouver. Yes, there is a Vancouver, USA, and it's an old established settlement. That's the oldest American settlement in the Pacific Northwest. It was named after Fort Vancouver, and that's at one time had the commander was Ulysses S. Grant, where allegedly he developed his alcoholism, but that's another story. Anyway, this is a community that's essentially it's Republican. It's a conservative. However, for several years, there's been a lot of discussion on the lack of infrastructure. The city shares the common river, the Columbia River, and there's a lot of needs, especially for bridges. We have a bridge that is on Interstate 5, and that bridge connects between Vancouver and Portland, and the bridge is essentially 100 years old. It's been upgraded over the years. And about 10 years ago, there was a major project to build a new bridge, and that fell through because of various problems with the locality. So my thinking is one of the things is about an infrastructure bank. It's not linked to the problems you get into with the local politics, and you kind of get a common approach. The one thing that really I think would sell here with the Republicans and Democrats alike is that the bank will be funded, will be self-funded. It'll be funded through capitalization through the existing Treasury securities and not federal taxes. And I think that's a key selling point, because the people here do not want debt. We have a lot of debt already, and it's hard to get people to get first. We're going to have another this. So I think that's a great selling point. The other thing I think that's very well written in the legislation is that infrastructure is not the classic bridges, roads, rails, whatever. Those are the main things, but it's broadly interpreted. So you have the classic infrastructure, the things that we're used to in bridges, roads, rail, ports, but you've also got green infrastructure. You've also got community development, other areas that would be really infrastructure but have never been viewed that way. So it's very well, it's broad, and it provides a breadth to a lot of communities in the nation, so forth. The other thing that's in this particular community, again, is we do need a bridge across the river between the two cities. But in addition, we also have a lot of ports along the Columbia River on both sides of the river. And there's a lot of issues about upgrading the ports, because we get a lot of business. We got a lot of shipping between Asia and the western coast of the United States. So it's very important, and there's been a lot of discussion. We have fishermen on the coast, the Portland coast in Washington, and they have certain needs from the standpoint of the fish, the sea, and protection, and trying to develop their businesses as well. So this is the type of thing where an infrastructure, a broad definition of infrastructure would be helpful to our community. The other thing is that the way we need, going back to the history of the interstate highway system, and also the Apollo project, which was actually an infrastructure program as well. The United States has to play the long game. I mean, we are in a competition with China and Europe and other areas of the world, and that they're going to invest in infrastructure. They know it's necessary. And we need to really be focused, because if we're going to remain a leader in the world, we've got to have a strong infrastructure system throughout the world, throughout our country. And the other thing that adds to that is this program allows for mega projects. In other words, I think one of the great assets of this particular legislation is that you can deal with major projects that are interstate or regional. One of the things is that we have a coastal issues in the Gulf and in the Atlantic, and you would need several $1 million to provide the protection to build the resistance for all the hurricanes that we're getting, the growth, the high water that is in the Atlantic Ocean. And one other thing is that the rural areas need it. And one of the things that they've talked about here is the 5G rolling out to the smaller communities throughout Eastern Washington. And this would be a means of being able to finance that. Finally, the other thing that I think, from the standpoint of as my business perspective, you also have positions defined in the legislation, but you need the right organization as well. You need the right leadership with the right competence, the right role setting, the right priorities, and delivering the right outcomes. I call them the 5 R's. I found that would be very important as well. And I think those are things that have been put into the legislation to look at. So to summarize, it's an extremely valuable direction. There's a real opportunity, and most of the individuals that I deal with, they're smart. They understand. They recognize that we have to start investing and developing the infrastructure for today and into the future.
Thank you, Dell.
Infrastructure is the bones of the nation, and our bones are very bridging.
Thank you, Dell. We're going to next move. Thank you, Dell. We're going to next move to the question and answer portion of our program with time of the essence here. And so first, there is a question from a Jackson Copel. The board structure appears to minimize representation from the communities most in need of infrastructure upgrades, namely low-income communities and Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. How can you guarantee that these funds will be appropriately allocated without strong representation in governance of most impacted communities. And so we have an answer to that question. 10% of the investment as it's characterized and required in our legislation, HR 6422, 10% of the investment is targeted to communities where 20% of the population are below the poverty level for 30 years or more. That is a formula that Congressman Jim Claiborne created and prompted, and one that we have adopted and inserted and included into the legislation. Next, what an anonymous attendee states that inquires what specific RFC policies and programs are applicable to our current pandemic, economy, and climate problems. I'm going to first toss that question, Stephen, to you, given your historic understanding, and then we'll go to Alphecca and Stan to have them provide their perspective. Stephen.
That's a big question, and I hope I can answer it briefly. One of my favorite RFC programs is the Electric Home Farm Administration, by where the RFC helped people buy appliances once they got electricity brought to their home. Only 2 out of 10 people in rural areas had electricity in the 1930s. Once the power was brought to them through the RFC, then they had to go out and buy fans, radios, washing machines, water pumps. So the RFC made microloans to these residents so they could go in and buy these things that they needed to plug into the modern age. The loans are repaid. The federal government made a profit on the effort. I think that same kind of effort could be done today. Instead of promoting consumption, could promote conservation. A new RFC or a new infrastructure bank could help people retrofit their homes and their buildings so they're energy efficient and storm resistant. That would reduce the consumption of fossil fuel and emissions at power plants. I think the RFC's activities during World War II are so relevant today as we address the coronavirus and climate change. The RFC essentially militarized industry in time to fight and win World War II. It built the plants that manufactured the trucks, trains, ships, airplanes, the high-octane gasoline, the synthetic rubber. It made a comprehensive effort to militarize industry so we could win World War II when we had started unprepared. That same kind of effort can be implemented today to produce all the protective gear we need to combat the coronavirus. Maybe it could help all of the medical industry come together to collaborate to create a vaccine and learn how to distribute it, much like we did with synthetic rubber, which the New York Times said it was second only to the atomic energy program. This is all to say we can do these big things again if we embrace the power of good government and feel patriotic when we do it. That kind of echoes some of the things that Stan was saying. We need to change our attitude about government, embrace it, and let it do the big things that a great nation requires. Or as Jesse Jones, the chairman of the RFC, said in 1937, economic recovery is not possible as long as we believe our government is our enemy. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Alphecca, your turn, and unmute if you would be.
Thank you. So several aspects on climate change. We've done and we've taken a look at what the overlap is between our National Infrastructure Bank and the Green New Deal. And our bank covers all of the objectives of the Green New Deal, like clean water, clean air, minimizing CO2 emissions by requiring that new projects use green materials and then do statements to show how they're trying to, and smart technologies to show how they're trying to minimize CO2 emissions. The only thing we don't cover is the electricity generators. But we do have $80 billion in there to rebuild an electric grid overlay to move renewables, however they're generated, from one spot to another. So we have paid a lot of attention to climate change and the effect of building infrastructure that will be climate resilient as well.
Great. Thank you. And Stan, your turn, if you would.
Thank you, Jack. I'd just like to add one thing. It sort of relates to what Bill was talking about a brief while ago. The legislation is for a bank that is tremendous in size, probably the biggest thing that the country's ever going to see. And it allows us, or it allows the people who are going to finance the projects, to develop a method of creating economies of scale that can be used to go beyond the project that people are working on and actually assume that we can develop different things, like, say, for example, for high-speed rail, that has to be electronic. If we're going to build a catenary system, why don't we develop that system for 30 or 40 locations and develop it in such a way that we get economy of scale to put it all out there? The same with a construction project, all right? Economies of scale will allow us to become more efficient, more economic efficient.
Thank you very much, Stan. Next, we're going to go to what we're calling the lightning round, where we're going to be asking a question and have all of our panelists be provided an opportunity to respond. And the first question is, when the infrastructure bank becomes a reality, will projects be allocated in all states, irrespective of their political bent? And how do you see states collaborating to build these projects? For example, building high-speed and other rail on the East Coast between Boston and Raleigh, North Carolina. Pennsylvania has a Republican legislature, and many of the other states tend Democratic. North Carolina has an almost even distribution between Republican and Democrat, etc. How will a national infrastructure bank bridge the divide between partisanship and political parties? I'm going to first toss this question to Bill. You, being involved with the labor movement, understand how economic development is of a bipartisan nature. Bill, your turn to take it away and respond to this inquiry and question. Thanks.
Thank you. I think when it becomes a reality, the opportunities that'll be afforded will demand a cooperation. When people have the opportunity to pursue changes in their career in a really meaningful way, they're going to compel the politicians to get on board. We can't fight over whose idea it was and who gets the star if we're talking about improving people's lives in such a meaningful way by having high-speed rail or high-speed internet, or frankly, the water supply systems all around the country. Many of them were created in the 1800s, and without being renovated, put all of us at risk. As far as state to state, there's already cooperation for the highway program that's been going on since the interstate was started about 60 years ago. It's not always been as efficient as it could be, but there's certainly been cooperation. I-95 goes all the way from the north to the south, and 64 goes east to west.
Thank you, Bill. Lisa, your turn with regard to the first question.
Okay, so the question is about ensuring that it's spread equitably across state lines for all states. There was a comment you read that I heard I thought was very important, and that is about making sure that communities that are disadvantaged, of color, of Indigenous people, need to make sure that they are also included. I 100% agree with that. I think when you talk about building this from the inside out, that needs to be part of the conversation. When it comes to being bipartisan, I mean, it's going to take a collaborative effort to get through this, for this, one, for the National Infrastructure Bank to get launched, as well as for our economy to recover. So I think, that's what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to have those conversations. We're trying to get this going. In Michigan, we are reaching out, again, like I said earlier, across the aisle. I don't care if you have an R or a D by your name, because this is about our local communities where we are. You know, we think locally, we act regionally. It's about bringing people together. It's about doing what's best for everyone, because we're all in this together.
Thank you, Lisa. Dell, you're next, and please try to keep it brief if you would. Thank you, Dell.
Okay, I apologize. Yeah, the two things that I see that would happen would be the bridge on Interstate Highway, expanding that and making sure that it's a good thoroughfare for people to go back and forth between the two communities, Vancouver and Portland. The other thing is that there's been discussions about mass transit from all the way from Salem, Oregon, all the way up to Seattle. And there's good rail stock, and that could be done, and that would be very highly supported, because more and more communities are going out of the Vancouver area and out of Portland, and there would be a real need. We've never had a history of that all in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you.
Thank you, Dell. Next, a specific question I'm going to have Stephen and Alphecca address, please, very quickly. How will the money earned by the new RFC be distributed, into which budget, under the Treasury or the Fed? And also, is there a citizen advisory board as far as the pieces this is concerned, back in FDR's program and the current one? Stephen, those two questions quickly, if you would.
But I will be so quick that I'm going to defer to Alphecca on those, because I think she's more qualified to answer them. But I do want to make a quick comment about the earlier question about how this will be equitably distributed to everybody through the nation if we model it after the RFC. Every congressional district in the United States of America received support from the RFC, and the leadership was transparent. They operated in a goldfish bowl, and that is what is required to make sure everybody gets benefits from the RFC, is non-ideological, non-partisan leadership that is transparent.
Thank you, Stephen. And Alphecca, if you can follow up on that and also mention what happens with the income.
Right.
Thank you.
So great question. This bank operates just like a commercial bank, but as Stephen said, it will be fully transparent. So we expect that earnings from the bank that are coming in will be about $80 billion a year when the bank is fully lent out. What will it use that $80 billion for? It'll use it to meet its operating expenses, just like any commercial bank. It'll set aside some loan loss provisions in case any of the loans go bad, shouldn't be a problem. And then it will do two things with the remainder. It'll pay back a dividend to government to reimburse for some monies that it took on the capitalization side. And then it'll set aside whatever's left over into a little trust fund in order to cross-subsidize to areas that are not able to afford servicing their loans. All of this will be completely transparent. At the end of the day, of course, if it ever winds down and there's any money left over, it reverts back to government. But and we have full, when I say fully transparent, we have watchdogs sort of everywhere inside the bank. So on the board of directors, for example, we have participants from labor, from state and local governments, from minority communities, to make sure that all the distributional, the geographic and income distributional effects from this bank really do take place, and to make sure that the loan agreements really stand up to what is required, that they pay Davis-Bacon wages, other little watchdog agencies within the bank, and then full reporting and disclosure of everything to the American public.
Thank you, Alphecca. One final question here. Do you see business and labor collaborating to build the projects, knowing that both entities have Republicans and Democrats in their ranks? Do you think having a large bank dispensing credit to many projects will help break down the episodic conflict between labor and management? In the past, especially during the New Deal, the Eisenhower Highway Program and the Kennedy Space Effort, those anonymouses subsidized, and the nation came together to build needed programs. Do you see that happening under the National Infrastructure Bank. Bill, I'm going to let you start with that, with your labor perspective. Bill.
In all of the building trades, we have great cooperation between the contractors and labor. We come together with a mutual goal, and that's to build quality products safely, on budget, on time. And I see that that cooperation simply expanding no matter the scope of the project. The goals and priorities don't change. And I think that industries that don't have currently that level of cooperation between management and labor will likely see the success of the building trades and hopefully model their behavior after it.
Thank you. Lisa, I'm going to let you take a shot at answering that question also from a local government perspective. How do you think a national infrastructure bank will play as far as partisanship or bipartisanship?
Well, I think the beauty of many local governments, when you talk about elected officials, is we're nonpartisan. So that's the first thing. But I think your question is more geared for, will people come together, whether you're Republican or Democrat, to work together, the union and the businesses, correct? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, so you're asking if, and I don't know if I'm in a position where I can answer that, because, I don't represent unions, so I really don't have that answer. I think the gentleman before me was probably best qualified. Naturally, I would like to think that there would be cooperation and that open communication because it's beneficial to everyone.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Again, I want to remind those of us that are not part of the panel and are viewing our program today that the National Infrastructure Bank legislation is H.R. 6422, which has been introduced into Congress. And let me just say for a moment, we that are part of the coalition have been working throughout the country advising and gathering support from many different unions from Ohio, Michigan, North Carolina, Virginia, California. We have rural farmers in Arizona. We have local governments in Pennsylvania and New York, all supporting this legislation. And the momentum for the support of this bill is gaining each and every day. We're very excited about it, and we view it as a necessity going forward, given the economic crisis that we face today. We're going to wrap up our discussion today with having our panelists give a 1 minute, please, final statement with regard to our presentation today. And I think we'll just go through the same order and sequence as the introductions were presented. So that will lead us to Stephen, your closing statement. 1 minute, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. I think the creation of a national infrastructure bank similar to the Reconstruction Finance Corporation is essential to address the monumental problems we're facing today, whether it's crumbling infrastructure, the pandemic, or climate change. An infrastructure bank, which is based on lending, not spending, and that's such an important differentiation, can make an enormous difference to the challenges we face today and can help us restore our great nation.
Thank you, Stephen. Alphecca, your turn.
Thank you. So this bank, as I've said, is a bank where everybody will be winners. We will spend a whole lot of money, $4 trillion, to fix everything. The devil's always in the details, and a lot of speakers have said that they are concerned that maybe this geographic dispersion or bipartisan dispersion won't take place. And so I have a plan for that. The plan is that I'm preparing now a report for every single state on the state of their infrastructure, and then I'm going to send them to folks to tell us what are your shovel-ready projects that are ready to be done in the first year of operation of the bank? Those are the ones that we can get out the door first. And so I think that that's a way to make it happen and to make sure we have a list of viable projects to start out with.
Thank you, Alphecca. Next, Stanley, your turn.
Thanks, Jack. The only thing I want to say is that as we've spoken and as we've mentioned in every one of our webinars, the appropriations process is actually taking us backwards instead of forwards. And we're not moving on any of the infrastructure improvements that need to be made for the 22nd century. Now is the time that we have to do something. So I'm urging everyone to please call your local congressman. Please call the number that you see on your screen at the end, the 202 number. Everybody has to get involved. So let's do it, and let's do it now.
Thank you, Stan. Well put. Bill, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. This bank is so important because the lending will be based on the value and merit of each project. And the interest rates, because of the way the bank is financed, will be affordable for even small municipalities to build a project that they can't otherwise get funding for. When you can amortize something over 30 years at 2% or 2.25%, it's certainly easier to get it started than if you have to go to a commercial bank and borrow at whatever the prevailing rates are then. I urge everyone, call their member of Congress, ask them to get involved, ask them to fully support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Lisa, your turn.
Hi, yes. So here's my bottom line, the takeaway, the ask. My ask is, this is a critical time in our country's history. Now's the time to act. We all have an opportunity to work together to bring forward support for HR 6422. That is a grassroots movement, is what I believe works. You need to start in your neighborhood, in the neck of your wood, so to speak, and reach out to your local elected officials, your state leaders, ask them to adopt resolutions, contact your congressperson, get the momentum going in your community. What I talked about today regarding the economy needs to recover right now. It's a very difficult time, but it needs reliable infrastructure to do so. And so this is that opportunity where we should all come together and try to move this thing across the finish line and get support for HR 6422. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And you just saw a moment ago the phone number to contact your congressman in Washington, D.C. We urge you, as Lisa and Stan has just suggested, and Bill, to contact them. Last but not least, Dell, we'd like to have a 1-minute closing statement. Thank you.
Okay, two things. One is, if you haven't read the legislation, the way the bill is written, I would highly recommend it. It's very well written, it's understandable, and I think it would cover a lot of the questions you might still have. So that's one, because that was what impressed me a lot, was how well the bill was written and some of the areas that I had concern with. And secondly, I concur that get a hold of the congressperson that you have in your area and contact them and inform them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dell. And thank you, everyone, the panelists and those viewers that have joined us today. We greatly appreciate your attention to this critical, important issue that we think can revitalize our economy at a critical moment in time where we have over 10% unemployment and millions of people out of jobs, and our national infrastructure essentially at risk. We will be having additional programs in the future, which we will have occur, I believe it is October 21st. Thank you so much. Please go to our website at www.nibcoalition.com, where we have videos of our previous presentations, details with regard to what the legislation has done as far as obtaining support throughout the country is concerned. And we thank you for joining us here today. And please continue paying attention to this idea. We think it can solve many of the important problems that our country faces today. Good day, everyone, and thank you again for joining us.